this is session 7. Woo. Only 26 more to go. So anyway, I want to invite everybody else to come to the One in Messiah tomorrow night. Every Friday night in Parma, 5994 Ridge, 6:15 or so. If you get there at 20 to 7, it won't matter. You know how that is. It's Christian time. And and all these sessions are on the YouTube channel called The Torah Class. So you can just search for that. And then the other site, of course, that has the Friday night is called One in Messiah, Gift of Grace Ministries. Because my friend Steve set the channel up when I didn't know anything about electronics and gave it this big long name which incorporated everything. And I don't want to deal with changing it because I'll probably mess it all up. Because the Google thing tells you if you change the name of your channel, it can mess up your whole identity in the Google account. So I got scared to even try it. So I'm stuck with that. So anyway, when we ended up last time, we got Isaac married to Rebecca. So that's Yitzhak and Rivka are their Hebrew names. And it's always good to know people's Hebrew names because when you get to heaven, that's how you're going to call them. You say, hey, Isaac, and he's going to say, he's not going to know you're talking to him. Oh, boy, this is a tough crowd again. Where's Jordan? So when we left off, Rebecca, was called Rebecca, so everybody knows what we're talking about. This is the difference, too, like even with the Friday nights thing that Joan always tells me. If you call Isaiah Yeshayahu, nobody knows what you're talking about. Or when you call Paul, St. Paul, Saul, or Shaul, people go, who's he talking about? Because, you know, when you go to a Messianic congregation, they call Paul Shaul or Rabbi Shaul. And a lot of people sit there going, who's he talking about? But when we left last time, Rebecca was pregnant. She felt horrible. And God said, there's 2 nations at war in your womb. 2 nations. So obviously she's going to have twins. And because of the promise to Abraham that involved descendants, you know, now we're going to start seeing descendants like crazy, getting ready to pop up, so to speak. Because Jacob, of course, is going to have 12 boys who are the 12 tribes. He's also going to have a girl who, you know, in Hebrew stuff doesn't count. So, you know, 12 boys and a girl. So now we're starting to get some serious descendants. And then, of course, as those 12 boys marry, a lot of kids come. So in a very short period of time, there's about 70 people that are going to leave later to go into Egypt. So starting with old Abraham, we're going to end up with 70 people in not too long of a time. So if we go down to Genesis 25, if somebody wants to start reading at verse 24, this is a great account. Read from 24 to the end of the chapter.
So when her days were fulfilled for her to give birth, indeed there were twins in her womb. And the first came out red. He was like a hairy garment all over. So they called him his name Esau. I can't imagine the baby coming out hairy all over. Afterward his brother came out, and his hand took hold of Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. Isaac was 60 years old when she bore them. So the boys grew, and Esau was a skilled hunter, a man of the field. But Jacob was a mild man, dwelling in tents. And Isaac loved Esau because he ate of his game, but Rebekah loved him.
Okay, let's pause there. So is this interesting account? So the first one's born and he's hairy and red. What a great description. So, you give birth to this baby and he's hairy and red. And you go, oh, man. And interestingly, Esau is, after this, going to be known as Edom, which is the Hebrew word for red. Because even when he grows up, he's going to be red. And probably even more hairy if he was hairy when he was a baby. Boy, one person laughing. I can't even. Well, two people laughing. That's good. So that's why his descendants are called Edomites, which means they come from the red guy. And you see here another interesting point is Jacob, whose Hebrew name is Yaakov. Yaakov is born holding on to Esau's heel. Now, what's important about this? Oldest son generally got all the inheritance. Now, we're going to see that this is not going to be true anymore. But in many cultures, not just ancient cultures, even, the British law, the eldest son inherited everything for centuries because, they didn't want the big land. If you had a huge area of land, you didn't want to divide it up if you had like 6 kids and everybody took a sixth of it. So the oldest son got everything. So if you were the firstborn son, you were golden. If you were the firstborn daughter, nobody cared. Then if you had another son, what'd they do if you had all girls? I don't know. But, oh yeah, that's right. It went to the nephews. Yeah. Yeah. I guess like the royal line goes like that too. If you have all girls, you have to go find a nephew or a brother or a cousin or something. But anyway, so Esau now is born first. So even though they're twins, of course, twins aren't born simultaneously. One's going to be born before the other. Usually there's a few minutes in between them. It can be longer. There's always this thing like on New Year's Eve, if you're giving birth to twins and one kid's born at 11:58 and the next one's born at 12:03, you get to take one as a tax deduction, not the other. But the fact that he's born first makes him more important. But if you remember, God told Rebekah, the older will serve the younger. So Yaakov, whose name means the supplanter, someone who wants to take over. Some people translate it as the deceiver, which, as we go through the study of Jacob, he deceives people all the time. He deceives his brother, his father, his uncle. He deceives people left and right to, as we would say, get ahead. He wants more importance. So even though his brother's coming out first, he comes out holding his brother's ankle. So, he says, well, maybe you're being born first, but I'm coming, right after you. And it tells us Isaac was 60 years old when the boys were born. And then we see like Esau was a manly guy. He was an outdoorsman. He hunted. Jacob liked him better because he was manly, ate his game and, did the stuff. Jacob was, kind of a wussy guy. He liked to be in the tent with his mother and, learned how to make different recipes and watched all the cooking shows on TV and probably did the wash. No. So his mother liked him better. The father likes Esau better, which is going to be, important in the long run because it's going to make for some exciting but weird family dynamics. When you have more than one kid, and the mother likes one, and the father likes the other one. But this is going to lead to a lot of intrigue. You probably already know the story, that this is going to lead to a lot of intrigue. And in this case, what's important is which one of these two boys is the child of promise. Promise meaning they're going to give rise to the Messiah. Promise meaning, what position are they going to have with the people? So far there's not a lot of people. You don't count Ishmael. So far you got Isaac. Abraham's already dead. So far you got Isaac and Rebekah, and you got two boys. That's not a lot of descendants. But things are going to change, and there's always a question of, like we say, well, Jacob is quite a deceiver. They even mention this, and if you've been watching The Chosen, when Jesus talks to Nathaniel, and he says, well, Jacob, there was a lot of deceit involved with Jacob when Israel started. And Nathaniel goes, yeah, because everybody knows that. And a lot of times people will get upset if you translate Yaakov as the deceiver. They like to call him the supplanter. Well, that's not a word that's used very much. But he was, in fact, a deceiver. But, does God wants Jacob to be the father of the nation. Because, of course, Jacob is going to have his name changed to Israel later. So not only is he going to produce 12 sons who are going to be the 12 tribes of Israel, but Jacob himself has his name changed to Israel, and then Israel becomes the name of the people, the nation. So this is a big thing. So whether God tolerated the deceit and everything, God doesn't approve of deceit. I doubt that God approves of, if I deceive Glenn and I get some kind of reward out of it. God probably doesn't say, oh, boy, he did a good job on that. Glenn didn't even see it coming. But sometimes he uses that kind of, like David. He had to put up with a lot of stuff with David. David's a man after my own heart, but he's kind of a creep a lot of the times. Peter is going to be the rock, but the guy's pretty much of a disaster, especially before Pentecost. So the question is, did God kind of put up with the deceit because he was going to go to an ultimate end anyway? Or, did he kind of arrange all the setup? But, we can talk about that as we go. But I think, like I always say on Friday nights, if God only used holy people to get stuff done, nothing would ever get done. All right. If only holy people were in heaven, who would be there? Just a bunch of big, beautiful angels. And so the stage is going to be set because Jacob is going to give rise to the nation. The nation is still called Israel. In fact, in 1948, there was some debate on what to name the new country. Most Jews wanted to call it Israel. But some people wanted to call it Judah. And so Israel won out because it kind of described all the people, and Judah's just one of the 12 tribes. Although, we'll get into the tribes later. So he's going to be the father of the nation. And so Jacob wants this. He's not even sure what it's going to be, but he wants it. He wants this position of, well, it's not necessarily power, but he wants this position of prominence. And he doesn't want his brother to have it. And we go to, this is kind of a story everybody knows, down to verse 29 in the same chapter. Somebody read from 29 till the end of the chapter.
Now Jacob cooked a stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. And Esau said to Jacob, "Please feed me with that same red stew, for I am weary." Therefore his name was called Edom. But Jacob said, "Sell me your birthright as of this day." And Esau said, "Look, I'm about to die. What is the birthright to me?" Then Jacob said, "Swear to me as of this day." So he swore to him and sold his birthright to Jacob. And Jacob gave Esau bread and stew of lentils. Then he ate and drank, arose, and went his way. Thus Esau despised his birthright.
So, what does this mean in our way of thinking? Esau could care less about the promise, could care less about messiahs, could care less about what's going to become the nation. All he cares about is his comfort. He's hungry. Okay? He's not starving to death. It hasn't been like 2 weeks since he's eaten. But he says, I'm going to die over here if I don't eat something, kind of like what I do. Like, I haven't had a donut yet today, and I already feel kind of like... But, he exaggerates this thing so his personal comfort becomes so important to him that he's willing to say, you know what, I don't care about any of that stuff. I just want to eat. So he's got this stew that's made out of some kind of red lentils. I don't know. But, everybody talks about how Esau gave up his birthright for a bowl of stew. And it's technically true, at least from their point of view, from the brothers' point of view. Isaac, their father, of course, doesn't know about this. I mean, God knows about it. He doesn't know about this. So here's Jacob showing that he's going to do whatever it takes. Okay, you're hungry, you want to eat, you want this stew, give up your birthright. This was kind of Jacob's personality. This is how he operates the whole rest of his life. And so Esau doesn't care. He cares about personal comfort, superficial stuff. It's like the church today, the 21st century, We want to be comfortable. We don't want to go to a church that's too hot. We don't want to go to a church that's too cold. We want to have comfortable chairs, comfortable pews. If it's raining, we don't want to go. If it's windy, we don't want to go. If we have to park too far, we don't want to go. Yeah, I know all that stuff, but I want to be comfortable. Jacob, on the other hand, doesn't even know what's going to happen to him, of course, but he knows he wants this. And the ultimate plan of God is for Jacob to have this. And again, to emphasize Hebrew names, it's the EL at the end of a name that's important, because that means God. So when you say Israel, Israel means I have wrestled with God, or I have struggled with God, or I have, I don't know what else is a good word, but it's a conflict. So if you say Israel, you're emphasizing that and not the word for God. If you say Israel, then you're emphasizing God's name. And, it's not practical in English to walk around, talk about Israel all the time because everybody thinks you're weird. Or, if your name is Michael, you don't want to say, oh, my name is Michael. Michael means who is like God. It comes from a Hebrew prayer and song called the Mika Mocha, who there is none like you. So, that's why sometimes I'll say Israel and sometimes I'll say Israel, depending on the audience. But since this is kind of an Old Testament class, I won't care if you think I'm weird. Actually, I don't care if you think I'm weird anyway. So, the red stew. This is the famous red stew. Sells his birthright for a bowl of stew. So now we see right away the trouble with the brothers. And we're not going to go through some of this stuff that's in the middle, but Isaac, of course, has the same promises that were given to Abraham because he's the one in line. God said, Isaac, your son that's going to come from you, both of y'all, or in Pittsburgh, both of yuns. Right, Tony? Is that right? Say both of yuns. But anyway, so because he's going to be the ultimate child of promise, the ultimate man of promise, he has the same promises that Abraham got. Descendants, land, everybody's going to be blessed through him. So when Isaac is old, and we're going to go down to chapter 27. So Isaac has the same covenant that Abraham had. So in chapter 27, we see what happens here, where Jacob goes to a whole nother level of deceit. And not only does he deceive, but his mother helps him. And, he deceives his father. Rebecca, who's, of course, the father's wife, goes along with it. Not only goes along with it, but encourages it, helps him plan it out, and even helps him to make an escape plan. Because after all, after this, Esau's going to be really mad. And very well could kill him. So, does somebody want to read part of this or all of this? Or, somebody start reading at the beginning of 27.
So old that his eyesight had fallen, he called his older son Esau and said to him, "My son." "Here I am," he replied. Isaac then said, "Now I have grown old. I do not know when I might die. So now take your hunting gear, your quiver and bow, and go out into the open country to hunt some game. Then prepare for me a dish in the way I like, and bring it to me to eat, so that I may bless you before I die."
You see, Isaac's calling Esau, the hunter, the manly guy. He doesn't call wussy Jacob and say, "Can you go over to Taco Bell and get me something?" He says, "I want you to go out, get some game, make some food that I like, because, I might be dying." He doesn't die for quite a while after this. So he calls Esau. He likes Esau better. Go ahead.
I had been listening while Isaac was speaking to his son Esau. So when Esau went out into the open country to hunt some game for his father, Rebekah said to her son Jacob, "Listen, I heard your father tell your brother Esau, bring me some game and prepare a dish for me to eat, that I may bless you with the Lord's approval before I die. Now, my son, obey me in what I am about to order you. Go to the flock and get me 2 choice young goats, so that with these I might prepare a dish for your father in the way he likes. Then bring it to your father to eat, that he may bless you before he dies."
Pause there. So now Rebecca kicks in. "I heard your father talking to Esau. He wants food. He wants the game. So here's what we're going to do. Go get me a couple of goats," or whatever it is. Goats? Yeah. "Go get me a couple of goats. We'll kill the goats. We'll make food out of the goats." I don't know if Isaac could have eaten 2 goats, but that seems like a lot of food. Small goats. But anyway, so she's implying, well, I'm going to fake the old man out because I'm going to make some stew out of the goats. And he's not going to know the difference because, after all, he's old, he can't see, he's a little confused. All he does is sit and watch TV all day anyway, so he won't know the difference. So, so the plan of deceit starts now, even with Rivka, even with Rebecca. And Jacob, of course, goes along with it. And then, as we're going to see in the next passage, he's worried about how he's going to get away with it. He doesn't say to his mother, "Oh, come on, Mom, that's not right. We can't deceive him. He's old, he can't see, he's my father, I shouldn't do that." No, he's like thinking, how am I going to get away with this? It's when you plan something, I mean, unless you're a crazy terrorist who doesn't care if they get killed, you know, one of the main parts of the plan is how you're going to get away. That makes sense. So Rebecca picks this up and is going to kick this in. And now look in verse 11, starting in verse 11. Go ahead.
Jacob said to his mother Rebekah, "But my brother Esau is a hairy man, and I am smooth-skinned. Suppose my father feels he will think I am making fun of him, and I will bring on myself a curse instead of a blessing."
Okay, pause there. So the question is, my brother Esau is a hairy guy, and I'm not. You know, he's a big manly guy. I'm a little wuss. And even though Isaac can't see really well, he's going to be able to tell the difference. What if he grabs my arm, or what if he, pats me on the cheek, or he's going to know that it's me and not him. So he's not questioning the morality of it. He's questioning how he's going to get away with it. And as we go into the next thing, you have to keep in mind how important this blessing is. You know, we're used to saying, "Oh, bless you," and, you're used to you go to church and there's a blessing at the end. And here, when somebody does a blessing over you, this is very serious business that can never be turned over, can never be revoked. Even if you find out later that there was a mix-up, you can't undo it. That's how powerful the blessing is, as we're going to see. But this is very typical of, the whole Old Testament, but especially all through the Torah. There's when a father blesses a son, that's it. When old Jacob's dying and he's blessing the boys, he can't reverse anything that he's done. And if one of the boys comes and says, "Hey, wait a minute, Dad, he's over there making fun of you and calling you names. How come you gave him a bigger blessing than me?" He says, "What do you mean he's calling me names?" "Well, I can't undo the blessing. I already did it." So this blessing and cursing is serious business. Later on when they get the law in Exodus 20, God talks about blessings and starts to talk about blessings and curses. These are serious business. Like right down to, if you criticize your father, you should be cursed. If you don't keep the Sabbath, you should be killed. If you don't do. So blessing and cursing is a very serious business. When they get after the wandering in the wilderness, when the people get to the land, we're going to see it near the end of Deuteronomy, and then at the very beginning of Joshua, which we're not going to get into Joshua, but God says you're going to have people on Mount Gerizim and some people on Mount Ebal, Levites, and as the people pass between the mountains, this side's going to be yelling all the positive things of the law. Do this and you'll be blessed. Do this and you'll be holy. Do this. And the people on this side are going to be yelling down, "Do not do this. Thou shalt not do that. You'll be cursed if you do that." So that as the people pass between the mountains, they kind of hear this going on. So it's very, very, very serious business. So it's not like a blessing at the end of your church service where you walk out and say, "Gee, I'm really glad that guy blessed me," and it really doesn't mean much to anybody. I mean, it's not that it doesn't mean much, but you know what I mean. You're used to that. If the priest or the pastor got up and said, "Normally at this point I bless everybody, but today I don't feel like it," everybody would go, "What do you mean?" But if they do bless them and then they leave, everybody goes, "Oh, that was nice." So, okay, go ahead. 13.
His mother, however, replied, "Let any curse against you, my son, follow me, just obey me. Go and give me the young goats."
Okay, pause there. So Rebecca doesn't care. Let the curse be on me. If there's a curse involved, let it be on me. If God gets mad, put it on me. If Isaac gets mad, put it on me. If the next door neighbor thinks I'm a creep, I don't care. Go ahead.
Jacob went and got them and brought them to his mother, and she prepared a dish in the way his father liked. Rebekah then took the best clothes of her and the older son Esau that she had in the house and gave them their younger son Jacob to wear. And with the goatskin, she covered up his hands and his hairless part of his neck. Then she gave her son Jacob the dish and the bread that she had prepared. Going to his father, Jacob said, "Father." "Yes," replied Isaac. "Which of my sons are you?" Jacob answered his father, "I am Esau, your firstborn. I did as you told me. Please sit up and eat some of my gain, so that you may bless me." But Isaac said to his son, "How did you get it so quickly, my son?" He answered, "The Lord your God directed me."
Okay, stop. Now look at this. This is unbelievable. He even brings God into it. You know, Jesus much later is going to say what? Don't take an oath to anything. You know, watch what you say when you take an oath. You know how many people say, "Oh, I swear to God." That, you know, when you bring God into it, then that's a whole other order of many orders of magnitude. Because then you're saying, by God's name, I'm telling you that this was the truth. And if it wasn't the truth, you're blaspheming the name. Capital N. Hashem, the name. God's name is so holy that you can't say it. God's name is so holy that you simply call him Hashem, which means the name. So when you bring God into it, you're really changing the whole dynamics. He says, so his mother says, "Put the goat skins on." He's going to think you're Esau. I mean, the guy can't see anyway. He can't change his voice, as we're going to see. But, you know, put the goat skins on, and he's going to think that you're hairy Esau. So then when he says, "Who are you, my son?" he says, "I'm Esau, your firstborn." So he lies to him. You know, plans to deceive him, goes through the deceit, lies to his father. "I have done just as you told me," lies again. "Arise, sit, and eat of my game," lies again, "so that your soul may bless me." First of all, he's not Esau. Secondly, Jacob never told him to do anything. And thirdly, he says, "Oh, I brought the game you wanted, so bless me." Isn't that amazing? So when Isaac says, "Well, how did you get it so quickly?" I mean, geez, you just left here like an hour ago. "Oh, the Lord, your God, brought it to me." He doesn't even say the Lord, our God. So he brings God into the picture. Okay, go ahead.
Isaac then said to Jacob, "Come closer, my son, that I may feel you to learn whether you really are my son Esau or not." And Jacob moved up closer to his father. When Isaac felt him, he said, "Although the voice of Jacob's, the hand is Esau's." He failed to identify him because his hands were hairy, like those of his brother Esau, so he blessed him. Again Isaac said, "Are you really my son Esau?" And Jacob said to him, "I am."
Oh, okay. So it says, your voice is Jacob's, but you feel like Esau. So he goes ahead and blesses him. And then he stops and says, "Are you really Esau?" And Jacob lies again and says, "I am." Now, there's no 10 Commandments yet. There's no law yet. They haven't gotten the 613 laws. But this is pretty clearly not right. I mean, no matter what culture you live in, what kind of religion you have, you know, lying to your father like this is not something everybody says, "Oh, that was nice the way he did that." So he lies to him multiple times. Okay, go ahead.
Then Isaac said, "Serve me, my son, and let me eat the game, so that I may bless you." Jacob served it to him, and Isaac ate, and he brought him wine, and he drank. Finally his father Isaac said to him, "Come closer, my son, and kiss me." But Jacob
Okay. So now he gives him the full-blown blessing. Because he's got animal skins on him. He smells like Esau. He feels like Esau. But he sounds like Jacob. So now, I mean, this is quite a blessing. You know, and you know, Isaac is, you know, kind of a faithful guy. He takes God's blessing seriously. Because God's, you know, you're like a field that God has blessed. So he says, you know, I hope you have plenty of food, the fatness of the earth. Other people are going to serve you. Nations are going to bow down to you. You can be master over your brethren. No one's going to be able to curse you. If anybody blesses you, they're going to be blessed. Kind of like the same blessing that God gave to Abraham at the beginning. Whoever blesses you, I will bless. Whoever curses you, I will curse. People have been trying to kill all the Jews since the beginning, and they've all failed, and they're still Jews, and they're gone. You know, the Amalekites, as we go on, we're going to see these. Israel's constantly battling with the Amalekites, and it tells us that God's going to deal with Amalekites through all of history. And the prophet Samuel told Saul he was supposed to kill every Amalekite, and he didn't. So he said, well, since you didn't kill them all, now you're still going to have to deal with them. And so then in the book of Esther, we see Haman as an Amalekite. Many Jewish thinkers think that Hitler was somehow an Amalekite, and all the other anti-Semitic people that tried to kill Jews. So here you see this blessing. Bless those who bless you, curse those who curse you. So he's giving this to Jacob, who's the wrong guy to get the blessing. And so far, this is all the deceit. This has all been made by deceit. So then, of course, Esau's going to eventually come home with a deer or I don't know what else they would have had. Ibexes. No, that was for show fires. I don't know what else they would have had. But it says in 30, now as it happened, as soon as Isaac had finished blessing Jacob, and Jacob had scarcely gone from the presence of Isaac, his father, Esau, his brother, came in from his hunting. He also made savory food and brought it to his father, and said to his father, let my father arise and eat of his son's game, that your soul may bless me. And poor old Isaac is like, wait a minute, what? And his father Isaac said to him, who are you? So he said, I am your son, your firstborn, Esau. Then Isaac trembled exceedingly. And said, who? Where is the one who hunted game and brought it to me? I ate all of it before you came, and I have blessed him. And indeed he shall be blessed. Who was here before? I ate his food and I blessed him. So consequently, he's always going to be blessed because of this. When Esau heard the words of his father, he cried with an exceedingly great and bitter cry, and said to his father, bless me also, O my father. But he said, your brother came with deceit and has taken away your blessing. Woo. And look at this. And Esau said, is he not rightly named Jacob? For he has supplanted me these 2 times. The stew and this. But this takes the cake. Or, well, maybe not a cake, but this takes the stew. He took away my birthright, and now, look, he has taken away my blessing. And he said, have you not reserved a blessing for me? Then Isaac answered and said to Esau, indeed, I have made him your master, and all his brethren I have given to him as servants. With grain and wine I have sustained him. What shall I do now for you, my son? And Esau said to his father, have you only one blessing, my father? Bless me also, O my father. And Esau lifted up his voice and wept. Then Isaac his father answered and said to him, Behold, your dwelling shall be of the fatness of the earth, and the dew of the heaven above. By your sword shall you live, and you shall serve your brother. And it shall come to pass when you become restless that you will break his yoke from your neck. So this is a pretty half-baked blessing. I mean, compared to what Jacob got. So, not unexpectedly, for 41. So Esau hated Jacob because of the blessing with which his father blessed him. And Esau said in his heart, The days of mourning for my father are at hand. Then I will kill my brother Jacob. So he wants to kill him. You know, it's kind of like in The Godfather, you know, when Michael wants to kill Fredo, and he says, I don't want anything to happen to him while my mother's still alive. But then once his mother dies, Fredo's dead meat. I love 2 of the Godfather movies. If somebody starts the script going, I can usually go along with it. But I don't like number 3, but 1 and 2 are great. So he says, my father's going to die pretty soon. When my father dies, then I'm going to take care of Jacob. So he's mad, wants to kill him. So now the question is, how is he going to get out of here? So Rebekah intercedes again. And she says to him, look down in verse 43, Therefore, my son, obey my voice. Arise and flee to my brother Laban in Haran, and stay with him a few days till your brother's fury turns away. In other words, you better get out of here. Go to my uncle's place. Hang out there for a while. I'll text you when it's safe to come back. So Rebekah thinks in a few days Esau will settle down. He doesn't see Esau again until years later. And by that time, he's got so many wives and descendants and stuff that he doesn't really care about the whole bit anymore, the promised bit. So she intercedes again to get Jacob off the hook, to get him out of the picture. So it's really quite amazing. So we have to go through, then it goes through a whole lot of stuff about what happens to Esau and who he marries. And, if you want to read that for your homework, that's awesome. But we're going to go, and this is one of my favorite things in the whole scripture, we're going to go down to 28, starting in verse 10, because as soon as Jacob leaves, something really cool happens. And I think for the sake of the class online, I'll just read it if y'all don't mind. So we're at 10. Now Jacob went out from Beersheba and went toward Haran. So he came to a certain place and stayed there all night because the sun had set. Now remember, in those days, when the sun set, that was the end of the day. I mean, you had no lights. I mean, maybe you had some torches, maybe you had some candles, but you really couldn't do anything. That's why even Jesus says, work while it's still daytime, because at night you can't do anything. Even when you look at, say, pioneer days, you had some candle. You ever try reading a book by candlelight? Whew. Yes, I guess you'd get used to it after a while. But so when it got dark, you pretty much went to bed because there wasn't much you could do. So he took one of the stones of that place and put it at his head and lay down in that place to sleep. He didn't know anything about Posturepedic mattresses. He didn't know anything about My Pillow. He grabs a rock. Imagine the My Pillow guy doing a commercial for Why don't you just sleep on this rock? You got to tell Jordan that one. So, he lays down on a rock and goes to sleep. I mean, see, I got done, a while ago, I was telling you what Jacob was such a wuss, and the other, Esau was manly, Jacob was a little mama's boy. But you got to give him some credit. He sleeps on a rock. In ancient Greece, that's what the Spartans used to do. They used to sleep on rocks to make them stronger. And they used to always take even baby boys and younger boys, they'd say, man, if you sleep on a hay or something comfortable, you'll grow up to be a big wuss. So they slept on rocks. Then he dreamed. Okay. Now, depending which translation you have, this might be a little different. Then he dreamed, and behold, a ladder was set up on the earth, and its top reached to heaven. And there the angels of God were ascending and descending on it. And behold, the Lord stood above it. Now, my translation says above it. Some say beside it. Okay. And the Lord stood above it and said, I am the Lord God of Abraham your father, and the God of Isaac. The land on which you lie I will give to you and your descendants, and your descendants shall be as the dust of the earth. You shall spread abroad to the west, to the east, to the north, and the south. And in you and in your seed all the families of the earth shall be blessed. Behold, I am with you, and will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Okay, so he's dreaming about a ladder, and angels are going up and down on the ladder. Up and down. The top of the ladder's in heaven, bottom of the ladder's on the earth. This translation said God is above the ladder. Some translations say beside the ladder or below the ladder. I meant to look up the Hebrew before I came, but I didn't get to it. Then Jacob awoke from his sleep and said, surely the Lord is in this place, and I did not know it. And he was afraid and said, how awesome is this place? This is none other than the house of God, and this is the gate of heaven. Now keep that in mind. This is the gate of heaven. Then Jacob rose early in the morning, took the stone he had put at his head, set it up as a pillar, poured oil on top of it. And he named that place Bethel, but the name of the city had been Luz previously. Okay, Bethel means house of God. He says this is the house of God. This is another thing. You see churches called Bethel, but it's actually Bethel, house of God. So, and then a little bit later down, he promises he's going to tithe. This is going to be God's house, and I'll give you a tenth of everything. Okay, so let's get down to this business of house of God. Now, this is what's commonly called Jacob's ladder. And I don't know I went to an engineering and science school. I don't know if y'all ever saw a Jacob's ladder, but, the electric spark climbs up the ladder when you have... you spread it like this, and I don't remember how we used to make them out of coat hangers or something, and the spark would go all the way up. So that's called a Jacob's ladder. Now, when I saw those things in high school and college, I had no clue who Jacob was, nor did I care. I just thought it was cool that it was called a Jacob's ladder. So this ladder's set up. There's angels going up and down. God's above the ladder. Jacob's down, and he's asleep. Just like Abraham was asleep when God made the covenant with him with the blood. So Jacob is asleep. This is actually a dream. And you see, God identifies himself. He says, I'm the Lord God. Now, we don't know God's name yet till Exodus chapter 3. But he says, the fact that Lord is capitalized, that means Yahweh. That's God's name. So he says, I'm going to bless you. You're going to have descendants. You're going to have this land. Everybody on the earth is going to be blessed by you, through you. All the families of the earth. Sometimes it says nations, goyim, which is us. Sometimes it says families, which is us too. So he's going to be preserved, and God promises everything that I'm speaking to you now is going to come true. Everything that I'm speaking to you now is a promise. Now, if God doesn't keep promises, then where are we? How do we know he's not going to change his mind about salvation? How do we know he's not going to change his mind about anything? How do we know he's not going to say, well, I've changed my mind about this. We're going to have a third testament. There's going to be another way of salvation. I mean, you can do the Jesus thing till 2050, but then it's going to change. That's not going to happen because his promises are secure. He doesn't change. Doesn't change because if he changed his mind, we wouldn't know where we were. That's like when people say, well, just because this is in the Bible, I don't believe it really happened. I think it's just a story. And I say, well, okay, if we can't believe parts of the Bible, then how do we know we can believe other parts? How do we know the Gospels aren't just a story? Paul says, it's foolishness to those that are perishing. Say that gospel makes no sense to me. Maybe that's just a fable. So anyway, the promises are repeated, and he calls it Bethel. He makes a monument with the stone that he slept on. As we go through this whole class, you're going to see monuments become very important. They always make pile of stones. And God always says, you make a pile of stones here, so when you're walking your dog and your little son is with you, and your son says, hey, Daddy, how come this pile of stones is here? Then you say, oh, because on this spot, here's what happened. And the kid says, oh.
What you see along the road when people have the
Yeah.
rocks.
Yeah. 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 Exactly. Yeah. So like, they crossed the Jordan, pile of rocks. Over here, pile of rocks. So now, we're almost done. Before we get to what's going to happen to Jacob next, because, he wants to marry a beautiful woman, and he's going to get tricked. When you're a deceiver and a supplanter, when somebody deceives you, you don't like it. You can deceive everybody else and think, oh, no problem. But if somebody deceives you, say, hey, wait a minute, that's not fair. Okay, somebody flip to John's Gospel, chapter 1. And this is my favorite. This is why I love Nathaniel so much. John chapter 1, let's go down to, and I love this passage. Let's go down to, Philip, not me, the other one, goes to get Nathaniel. And he says, come and see who we found. We found the Messiah. In fact, he says, we found him of whom Moses in the law and the prophets wrote. In other words, we found the Messiah that's prefigured in the Torah, that's talked about by the prophets. We found him. So Nathaniel says, who is it? And he says, Jesus of Nazareth, the son of Joseph. And Nathanael said to him, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Now, why would he say such a thing? Well, number one, Nazareth was a dump. There are a few hundred people living there. As Nathanael says in the series, The Chosen, they barely have a synagogue. They got animals all over the place. It's a pretty rundown. The place is a dump. And secondly, the whole area of Galilee was looked down on because it was all backwards, simple people. There were no schools there. There were only 7 synagogues in all of Galilee at Jesus' time. And it's a big area. So Nathaniel, being Mr. Smart Aleck, says, can anything good come out of Nazareth? Now, that's really a snotty thing to say, right? Philip said to him, "Come and see." Jesus saw Nathanael coming toward him and said of him, "Behold, an Israelite indeed, in whom there is no deceit." Some translations say a true Israelite, in whom there is no guile. Nathanael said to him, "How do you know me?" Jesus answered and said to him, "Before Philip called you, when you were under the fig tree, I saw you." Nathanael answered and said to him, "Rabbi, you are the Son of God, you are the King of Israel." Jesus answered and said to him, "Because I said to you, I saw you under the fig tree, do you believe?" Jesus sounds kind of surprised. You say this just because I said I saw you under the fig tree? Now in the series, they kind of expand it a little bit. Jesus tells him all the stuff he was thinking and saying. "You will see greater things than these." And he said to him, "Most assuredly I say to you, hereafter you shall see heaven open, and the angels of God ascending and descending upon the Son of Man." The ladder between heaven and earth that Jacob saw with angels going up and down the ladder, Jesus said, "I'm the ladder. I'm the connection between heaven and earth." You're going to see angels ascending and descending on the Son of Man. I'm the connection to heaven. I'm the only way that you can get to heaven. I'm the ladder. He's referring back to this passage in Genesis at Bethel. So he says, this is the house of God. God was here. Okay, so here's Nathanael in the presence of God and Jesus, fulfilling the whole thing that what happened with Jacob at Bethel. Is that cool or what? And, my translation says that in Jacob's description, God was above the ladder. Well, now God is standing beside Nathanael. So, God, in heaven is you're looking over this whole scene, and now Nathanael is there with God incarnate at the same level talking to him. How cool is that? John, the end of John chapter 1. Yeah, yeah, he's got it. So how cool is that? That blows me away. We did that one Friday night called The Ladder. I should do that again. That was a while ago. Yeah. So we're going to end it there because now, the deceiver is going to see a beautiful woman that he wants. Now, how unusual for a young man to want a beautiful woman. I never heard of such a thing. I know, what was he thinking? And instead of getting the beautiful woman, he gets her ugly sister. So we're going to read, next is going to be Rachel and Leah. And as I always like to say in these classes, Rachel was beautiful and Leah was ugly. We don't know. But it tells us that Rachel's beautiful and Leah not so much. But Leah becomes the mother of Judah, so she becomes the ancestor of Jesus, not Rachel. But anyway, so that's the end of this lesson. So now we're going to move on to 8, but not today.